In the first couple of years, I was everything. I was writing the code, I was getting the customers, I was making the operations, I was doing everything.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley in partnership with Leumi Tech and sponsored by Hippo Insurance, Turing, Upwest Labs, and Hillel at Stanford. It's time to get inspired by one of Israel's leading entrepreneurs. Meet Chen Amit, co-founder and CEO of Tipalti. Chen is a veteran high-tech executive and repeat entrepreneur. Prior to Tipalti, Chen was the CEO of Atrica, a carrier Ethernet company that Nokia-Siemens acquired. Before Atrica, Chen was co-founder and CEO of Verix, a provider of business intelligence software. At ECI Telecom, Chen founded their ADSL business unit and led it from inception to $100 million in annual sales. He earned a BSc from the Technion, Israel Institute of Technology, and an MBA from INSEAD. Chen Amit, thank you for joining me today. How are you?
Great, thank you for having me.
I'm honored to have one of Israel's greatest inspirations from the tech scene with an incredible journey all the way from the telecom industry to creating a huge streams of revenue to the different companies you've worked with, all the way now to co-founding Tipalti with the amazing Oren Zev, and today running this incredible company that is seems to be doubling at an incredible pace, because as I was doing research for this episode, I came across articles in every year by different publisher, and every year you seem to have doubled, the amount of transactions and the amount of employees. So that literally, year-over-year growth. But before we get to all of that, Chen, we have to talk about a few key things. First of all, 2007, 2008, making a living out of poker. It is a lifelong dream of mine to compete and win in the World Series of Poker. I have to hear a little bit about this.
So I sold a different company, Atrica, to Nokia-Siemens at around that time, and I had a year to kill, so to speak, between selling Atrica and relocating back to Israel. We were living in California, and we planned to move back to Israel in the year. And actually was also starting some software initiatives. I had some ideas for software around poker. I was writing some interesting poker software. And then for that year, I made I made a living. Not like it's a modest living, let's say, but yeah, I played poker for a living for a year and supported my family. It's not enough to feed my family, but it was a positive experience.
I love that. So mark your calendar. In a few years, we're going to meet each other at Table 9 at the World Series event. But before then, I also have to ask about, this. You're practicing snooker with the European champion. You're a private pilot that flew over, active volcanoes. I'm seeing a trend here of doing, these extraordinary things and going deep into them. Tell me a little bit about this, going deep into your hobbies, because you're not just scratching the surface. You really are going deep.
That's true. When I do something, I'm kind of all in. I have a few hobbies that I rotate between. Now in COVID, I am leaning more towards snooker. For anyone in the US, snooker is a form of billiard. That is the popular form in Europe. So again, when I moved back, so I was playing poker, moved back to Israel in 2008. After a year, a friend invited me to play snooker at some club. I played with him for a couple of years, and then I forget which birthday, but my wife arranged for me an hour practice with, he was the Israeli champion at the time. Since he won like 5 national championships, and last year he won one of the European championships. So now weekly I practice with him, and it's great. What do you want? Like, first of all, you want a hobby. It allows you to kind of diffuse from the day-to-day work. And also, it's really great to challenge yourself. Snooker is really hard. To challenge yourself and improve. Every time you improve, it feels you like, okay, we made progress. We're now doing better, and we're doing better. So, yeah, it's great. And flying was a passion since I was a kid. I was like a a teenager building model planes and subscribe to the aviation magazine and all of that. But because at the time they weren't taking people with eyeglasses to the Air Force, I couldn't even try. But in 2000, the first thing I did after I left ECI, that telecommunications company, the first thing I did, literally the day after, was take a flight lesson here near Tel Aviv. And I flew with Oren to Mexico once, like 17, I think 7 or 8 hours. I forget how many, but many, or maybe 17 hours, many, small airplane. I went whale watching with those small airplanes, and
Wow.
yeah, in Hawaii, I flew over the volcano and saw it burning red. My wife, myself, and my youngest.
I just love that, Chen. Incredible experiences, and the main inspiration I'm getting from this is this idea of going deep, not
Yeah.
having enough of just tasting it, but really becoming somewhat of an expert. And it sounds like you've become somewhat of an expert in all of those domains. But what's just as interesting is the fact that your passion for diving deep into new uncharted territories. It also sounds like that's almost the journey to start Tipalti, right? Because heavy into fintech, you're not from fintech. How does that happen that you're coming to disrupt an industry that you don't really know too much about?
So you're right. What attracted me to this problem that we're solving was that I didn't know anything about it, right? Because that's what's challenging. That's what's exciting, to learn something new and to be challenged. And so Oren had a portfolio company that was suffering from some challenges around payments. He introduced me to the founder, and that was the genesis. A founder that said, "I have a pain, please solve it for me." Initially, I thought it was going to be a project. Again, at the time, I was in between, like after Atrica, like a year or so, a year and a half after Atrica, I said, you know what? I really like programming. I haven't programmed for 17 years, but why don't I take it as a project, see what I can do for this founder, and go back to programming. I really liked it. It's like, for me, programming is like problem solving and riddles and all of that. So went and built it for that founder, and really shortly after found another company with the same pain. A few years later, we're processing $18 billion. We're 400, growing to almost 800, and growing, as you said, not only doubling year over year, but accelerating our growth 5 years in a row. So
that is unbelievable. So walk me a little bit through the 10 years. You mentioned to me that every year is its own journey, and it's its own world that we can spend hours talking about. So I'd love to hear a little bit, from the founder's perspective, growing from a project to an $18 billion transactional a year project. It's not so much of a project anymore, but how do you make that transition from a project to, okay, we're actually going to build this into a real company?
Yeah, my role really changes every, I want to say, 18 months or so. At this pace, at the pace we grow, my role actually changes every 18 months. In the first couple of years, I was everything. I was writing the code, I was getting the customers, I was making the operations, I was doing everything. Then we started slowly to build the company, and the role changes every 18 months or so. In 2017, we made a conscious decision that this is now growth pivot. We're switching gears, fundraising, and accelerating our go-to-market engine. And everything happened since. When you see all this doubling, growing, accelerating growth year over year, it's the result of that decision that there's product market fit, there's a product, there's a market, we need to go after and accelerate it. We're now at the most recent junction. I don't know how many junctions there were, but we're now at the junction where we're growing from, we were 280 people at the beginning of 2020, which is still manageable I still hired the vast, about a third of the company I met during the hiring process.
Wow.
Many others I met in other situations. By now, when we're 400 and we are hiring almost 400 this year, so we'll be 800 by the end of the year, the company is now changing. Now, it's not as if everyone met me and heard me in person and they know where we're going and why we're going there. And the alignment needs to be more structured and communication needs to be more structured. And you need to be clearer with your vision, with your strategy, with your plans, so that everyone is aligned, everyone's rowing in the same direction, and that word that is used often, culture, really means something. You really need to invest in the culture, that culture that we've built over 10 years. Now you need to be very, in 2 years' time, that team that we had at the beginning of 2020 will only be a quarter of the team. Because we're growing so fast, there will be a minority. So if you want to retain your culture, and we do, you need to invest in it and to be mindful about it.
So what does it actually mean to invest in it? Because on one hand, you can be as intentional as you want about the hiring, about the people. You can be as intentional as you want about the vision of the company. But how at the end do you maintain this sense of the Tipalti culture, trying to maintain as much as it was in the beginning that made it so successful, as you're literally doubling the company, right?
Yeah, so there. It's not one thing. You need to do a lot of things that will eventually translate into that culture being maintained. It starts with hiring. You need to hire the right people for your culture, and you need to correct hiring if you made a mistake. And it starts with the top. I need to hire executives who are really reflecting the culture of the rest of the team. And then they need to hire, and we need to talk about it and make sure that we hire the second levels and so on and so forth. When you see, you need to talk about the culture. People need to understand what's important for us and how do we take decisions and what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. So culture is not about, but I'll correct myself. Culture is not so much about talking. Culture is mostly about doing. You need to walk the talk. And if you see good things that reflect your culture, amplify them, recognize them, elevate them. If you see things that are contradicting to the culture or hurting the culture, make it very clear that you're correcting it and that it's unacceptable. And as long as you do that and in a respectable way, people will appreciate that. And I think that's what drives culture.
I can't even imagine, the difficulty and the craziness of growing a team, almost pretty much doubling year over year. And just as the team is doubling, also what the company is doing is increasing, right? The engagement is increasing, the market leadership is increasing. Your responsibility to navigate through the fintech world is changing. Talk to me a little bit about what Tipalti actually does today, and a little bit about this industry and the gap that you found that today you're solving for over 1,000 customers, I believe.
Yeah. So possibly the last part of the finance stack to be automated is around accounts payable. And accounts payable, especially in the mid-market and in fast-growing companies, it's not where your typical CEO likes to invest resources and time. Suppliers, paying suppliers, who cares, right? Who really, really cares? The only ones who really care is Tipalti. We really, really care. And that's why we have a business, because we care and we help our customers who really want to do something else. They don't, it's not, I'm exaggerating when I say they don't care. They care, but they want to invest the precious resources in the product, in the service, in expansion, in net promoter score, in whatever a key metric that is hardcore to their success. These are the prime priorities for them. If we can take a very cumbersome, error-prone, risky process remove it off their table, will do wonders to their ability to continue execute in the places where they really need. And that's what we do. So we automate that. And unfortunately, accounts payable is not one thing, it's dozens of things. It's onboarding suppliers, it's tax, it's anti-money laundering, it's currencies, it's payments, it's supply chain finance, it's invoices. Really, it's crazy. That's the challenge. The challenge is that you have a broad set of discrete functions that you need to deliver to a CFO or VP finance that doesn't have a moment to spare. You cannot make it too complex for them. It needs to be simple, needs to implement quickly, and just take away all that challenge. But the more complex it is to deliver a great service to a customer, the better we are, because we've invested so many years in building a really robust, really broad solution that does all of these things that I mentioned, from supplier onboarding, vetting, tax compliance, currency management, payments, invoices, all of that. So we are a holistic solution for the whole payable automation on a global basis. Layer in global, layer in cross-border, regulators from 120 countries. Have fun. It's an exciting time.
I love that. So going back to the founding and you meeting the founder, understanding that there's a gap, taking on this project that turns into the incredible entity that is Tipalti today. What role did it play? Because you're saying the words simple, quick, seamless, all in the context of fintech and in the context of finance and CFO. That doesn't go hand in hand in my mind. So obviously you're onto something here. But what I'm curious about is how big of a role did your sort of, I guess, humbleness or, innocence coming into the industry, how did that play a role? Because a lot of people talk about, in order to really disrupt an industry, you have to be somewhat of an outsider to it.
Absolutely. We weren't the first in the market. There are a couple of competitors that were in the market, let's say 10 years before we started. And by the way, we've met them, we've discussed what we're going, at least some of them. In the first year, I met them, I discussed what I'm going to do. They gave me a thumbs up. Yeah, go ahead and do that. But since they were so ingrained in what they were doing and in their own way of doing business, they didn't even see that it's just, you need to look at it this way and not that way. It's just a different perspective on the problem. And yeah, for me, it was really simple. I sat with the founder of that company. I knew nothing about payments, tax compliance, AML compliance, currencies. I know nothing about that. These are some of the set of challenges he was speaking with. So I sat with him in a session. I asked, okay, can I join you and see how your day, that payment day, he had the 2 payment days a month, how your payment day looks like. I sat with him for hours. It was ridiculous. It was so funny that it was obvious that there was something to do here. And then I thought, then I spent a couple of months thinking, okay, so what's the right approach? How do I do that? And I started sketching a mock-up and shared it with the two. Now I had already the 2 CFOs, and they gave me feedback. And by the way, some of the feedback I took and corrected my design. Some of the feedback I'm really proud to have rejected, and it was a feedback that one of the executives, they're not the 2 founders, but another executive told me, you have to do it this way or else there's no way we'll adopt it. But I understood that he's missing the big picture. I did it differently, and it was critical, still is critical to our success.
So he wanted a faster horse and you wanted to build a car.
Yeah. He wanted you're right. He wanted a faster horse. It's exactly that. He didn't know what he didn't know. Yeah.
Right. I love that. And Chen, you've reached a stage, I believe you said in 2017, that junction of transitioning from product market fit search to the growth. So you reach the point where every startup dreams to get to, where they're so confident that they found product market fit, their customers are happy, and they're able to make that transition. Was that easy? Was that obvious when you found product market fit? Because I can't imagine it being, one day a light bulb says, okay, now we're ready. Now we have product market fit. How do you even determine that?
It was like that. It was like that. One day we said, okay, tomorrow is growth. But obviously it was true for probably 6 or 9 months earlier, right? It wasn't that point in time. It was more complex. 2017 was a complex year for us. We were fundraising, then we had an acquisition interest, then we were fundraising again. And through all these processes, at the second fundraising, we said, okay, why are we fundraising? We need to move faster. We need to move faster. What are we waiting for? What is it for? Really, that was a discussion between Oren and myself. What is it to wait for anymore? We have retention in Tipalti is ridiculous. Like, customer retention in Tipalti is the best, not in the industry, to my knowledge, in the world. We have 99% gross dollar retention, 130% net dollar retention. I don't know of any other company that on an annual basis loses 1% of the value of its customers through churn. So we had that all along. It was, if it wasn't 1, it was 2. We had great retention, we had great expansion, we had great unit economics. Why wait? There was nothing, there was no additional milestone to reach. Now it was about execution. So once we've had this discussion, I'm describing it it took less time to make that discussion and decide on it than what I just did. It took us 5 minutes to say, okay, why are we fundraising? What is there to wait for? Let's go. So, yeah.
What I love about these stories is, from as a young entrepreneur on the sidelines, sometimes I go to, a Stanford Business School class and I read a case study about all these different considerations. Should they do this? Should they do this? They sit for months and they deliberate and there is no right. And then you see, a unicorn, a CEO of a unicorn coming and saying, really the decision to take that light switch, once we had that right discussion, it was obvious and we made the decision, we moved quickly. And I just love that because it brings it down to reality. And I just love the journey. Chen, thank you so much for spending your time with me. I know how busy you are and I so appreciate it. I love Tipalti. I love what you're doing there. And it's just an inspiring journey all around. Before we leave, I have to ask the most important question, which is 3 words that you would choose to describe yourself. Or if I would ask anybody in Tipalti, how would they describe Chen Amit?
Well, it's 2 different things. How I would describe myself and others would describe me. I think the overlap would be limited. I'm sorry. How I would describe myself: simple / humble. Right? I like to keep things simple. And I don't hold myself too seriously. I don't hold the company I hold the company. But people make too much. Like, we're serving a market, we're building a product. But let's be serious. Let's not build our egos more than they should. Right? We're here. We're working together. We're building something. So keep it real. One of the execs told me that one of my management tools is humor, and I think that's true. I think I use humor, and I go deep. As you said earlier, I go deep. I know how to play at the strategic level, but I can also go very deep. And if I need to, and Oren also says that I'm even keel, that I'm not easily rattled. Like, no high highs, no low lows. I'm kind of
balanced,
even keel. So, yeah.
I love it. Chen, toda rabba. This was wonderful. I'll see you at the final table at the WSOP in a few years. And until then, I can't wait to keep following the journey. Take care.
Thank you for having me.